Welcome back with the Power Perception Podcast. It is your host, Langihola, here today. Today we're being joined by former BYU wide receiver, former All-American wide receiver from high school, former Euless Trinity Trojan, also played at Oak Ridge, my good friend, Ross Appo.
Thanks for having me on. Finally found some time to get on here. I've been watching all the episodes roll through, and I figured I had to be on one of these.
So, funny story. When I first started the podcast, I think I initially started in January, but I wanted to start at the beginning of the year. You were actually the first person I hit up in February. And then February or March-ish, I can't remember. And then the day you were supposed to come on, your daughter was born, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And so finally Ross is, he's a busy man, always working. And so we finally got enough time. So we'll go ahead and just jump right into it. Playing the sport of football, my favorite segment of the show is football can be really humbling. And for you, when was the first time you got playing the sport of football?
I probably say in college, going through high school, it was now that I think back, it was probably about fifth grade. And it was actually me and Theo were going against my brother, my older brother, Mark. And we had the pads on, and it was something that my dad told me early on in life, and that was, if you always work out a step ahead, or you're always, pushing against the best person, that when you get to a regular game, a regular match, or you're with your peers that are the same age, it's just going to be a lot easier. And so, every week I found myself having to hit with my brother. And so he was about 220, 225 at the time. And I was only like a $140. $150, and so we would go head up, and he would crack me every single time, and it wasn't a usual thing for me, because I was used to going against my teammates, and I was always cracking those guys and busting their head open, and then now I got to go against my brother, and every single time it was humbling, because I got up, my dad's like, line up again, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me, I got a CTE already. Everything's going downhill for me. But when I got to practice with my teammates, my regular teammates, everything was a lot easier. The game was slower. It just seemed like when the ball was snapped, I could just see everything happening a lot faster. When I was able to work with my brother, things were just kind of happening right then and there. And so fifth grade was the first time that I remember, my brother got me really good.
It's funny. I remember, so for those of you who don't know, me and Ross grew up together in Euless, Texas. And, man, if you think about Ross's dad, my Uncle Totai, they would take us to Lone Star Park or Euless Junior High Field, and we would be suited up, full padded, all of us, like we were a team practicing. And I remember after Ross and Theo would get blown up by Mark, Totai would turn around and make Ross and Theo go against me, Lahi, and the younger boys. Mm-hmm. And I think I told of the first time I got, that's the real time, the first time I got. Because I remember there was one specific time where we were lining up, and you guys had just got done going through Mark. And then we come back, and we're all lining up to go against you two. Uh-huh. And Reed was with us this time. Your cousin, and Reed and Lahi were like, oh, we're just going to go chill and hang out by TJ, Sam, and Seal. Yep. And so it was me going against you and Theo for like 30 to 45 minutes straight. And I remember thinking in my head, like, how is this going to be better? Right? And then fast forward to that season, I think we were playing, who was I playing for? I think I was playing for the Panthers at the time. But there was a sense of, since I got my ass busted by people who was busting everyone else's ass in like the 4th, 5th grade level or 5th, 6th grade level, like no one in the 3rd, 4th grade level can actually do anything I haven't seen before. Yep. And I remember like that kind of mentality kind of carried on, because that didn't only stop there. Like when we would go to Coach Harris, that same mentality would carry on.
Yep.
And so, you know, you had guys who were coming in training, and they kind of just set the standard of, oh, like if you want to be really good at football, this is kind of what it's going to take. So kind of go into maybe, you know, your childhood and how you got introduced to the game.
So growing up, I was always pretty athletic. I could pick up a ball in any sport. I played football, basketball, baseball. I think soccer was the only thing I didn't play, because soccer isn't really big in Texas, and you know, as a Polynesian, I'm not doing all that running. I'm not going to do all that running for a 1-0 score. So soccer was like the only thing. But growing up, I was pretty athletic. You know, I had a long body, and I was just kind of put on this earth to play some sports. And so my dad, I know it was up until 4th and 5th grade. My mom didn't let me play sports or play football, because she didn't want me to get hurt. And now, you know, as I'm a parent, I understand the dangers of football and kind of the long-lasting effects that it can have on you. And so, kind of jumping forward, my dad signed me up for Mid-Cities football. Yep. So 5th and 6th grade, I started playing football. My dad, he noticed that, man, he's running around outside on the street with his friends and making all these crazy catches and throws, whatever I was doing. So he signed me up for football, and we kind of snuck in. My mom had no idea. She found out I was playing, and she tried to take me out, tried to do whatever she could to not let me go play. And so I got into my first game. Man, I scored several touchdowns, and this was with the Warriors. Dell was on the Redskins, and you know, we practiced right there, right by each other, and that was the first time I was introduced to the sport, was 5th grade. And thanks to my dad, who took the leap to throw me into football, the journey kind of just started there.
I, for one, can kind of speak on, you know, always watching from afar, just because, you know, our little neighborhood always had, I feel like we had everybody who played pretty well, who kind of went up and did something for, you know, Euless Trinity, or, you know what I mean? And so you had Dell and them up the street, around the corner. You had like Reed and Kale and them, and then you had Sam Tevy and them on the other side. And so, you know, growing up in the atmosphere where like pretty much everyone lived, breathed football for the longest time, I never knew that you didn't play until your 5th, 6th grade year. And what's funny to go and look back is, I think for a lot of our Polynesian parents, there's this, I don't know, there's this stigma of where like you have to like put your kids into sports super early, you know what I mean? And sometimes a lot of our kids can get burned out by the time their bodies are breaking down and whatnot. What are your thoughts? I know you being a trainer with football on that.
Starting early, I don't think there's a problem. I think starting early is the best thing. And with guys that I've trained and guys that I work with in the past and even now, the younger guys that start a little bit earlier are usually guys that are kind of on the scene a lot sooner. And when I say on the scene, I just mean, you know, they're developed by the time they get to 9th grade, or when it's actually kind of organized and, you know, your coaches are established and everything's kind of running smooth. The guys that start earlier, they're ready to go. So they're not getting to their football practice. They're not having to learn kind of the technique. Now they can just practice and go through the plays. And I think that's what a lot of guys kind of miss early on, that start later. And that was the difference for me, is like, even though there were guys that had started playing flag football when they were, I don't know, 2nd, 3rd grade, I was able to kind of jump in and adapt to the sport right away. because I never played organized sports up until 5th grade. No basketball, no baseball or anything. All of my sports started in 5th grade. So I learned to play the sports, pretty much just right out on the street with friends, family that was around. The area we lived in, there wasn't a whole lot of money. So everything we did and we learned was kind of from each other and then just from being out on the street. And so sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I would have started earlier, but then I look back, I was totally fine starting when I did, and I didn't feel burned out or anything either. It kind of varies from guy to guy, from athlete to athlete, whether they get burned out or not. So
I think I've talked to a lot of athletes, and some of them feel like they're on the opposite ends, like, yeah, you can get burned out. But I think the thing that probably resonates with me is that if you truly love what you're doing, I don't think you'll ever be burned out.
Yeah,
right.
And I think that was the difference for me, because I didn't know I really loved football until I was up in the attic doing push-ups and sit-ups in 6th grade, and it's like 100 and some degrees in Texas. It's hot, it's humid. But until I was up there doing exercises, I was like, man, I don't know what I'm doing this for, but maybe it's going to help me in the future. And then, that's when I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing this for. I know what it's going to do for me. And when I started seeing myself kind of excel past the other guys that have been playing, then I was like, okay, all those hours that I spent up in the attic, all that time I spent over on the hill, when guys were, playing with their friends and doing all that stuff. Now I know what it was for. And even now today, I don't feel like I'm burned out. I just don't feel like my body could perform the way I would want it to. And that's the hard part is knowing that I still want to play. I'm not able to make the same motions, do the same things that I was doing. And I know what it takes to perform. I don't know if my body would let me get there anymore. Yeah.
It kind of resonates with me to like see you, because you were one of the only people growing up that I know, like, you were always locked in when it came to sports, right? And I'll share this specific story. They'll told me one time you guys were at Oak Ridge, and it was you, him, and was it Thomas?
Yep, Thomas was there. Yep.
Yeah, and so you three were, I think you guys were getting ready to do like a combine or some type of workout at Oak Ridge, and he remembers, him and Thomas were just like joking around, and it was like 10, 20 minutes before the workout, and something about your demeanor had already changed. You had already locked in. It was time to like go to work, and him and Thomas were like still playing around. They look over, he was like, oh shoot, like Ross is serious. And so Thomas starts getting a little quiet, and then he starts getting ready to get in the zone. And then Dell, he was like, damn, like, okay, I need to stop playing around. Like, these two are serious about what they're doing. And it kind of forced him to be like, okay, let's turn this switch off and let's turn on the focus switch. And then he said, it was always cool growing up next to someone who I saw was probably one of the greatest athletes I'd ever seen, because then it kind of forced me to be, it's like, I don't want to be, just the great athlete's friend. I want people to know I'm a great athlete too. And so that always kind of like, he always kind of put that in perspective whenever we had any like conversations about you. I kind of want to backtrack a little bit. You talked about how your dad put you into sports in 5th grade. In terms of sports, did you have any mentors, guys who kind of like, Ross, you're a great athlete, but in terms of your mental or your physical, this could probably help you out a lot more if you knew this?
Growing up, I think the biggest mentors that I had were my dad and Theo's dad. And I say that because they drove us everywhere. They paid for everything. And to kind of sit back and watch those two guys take care of a group of kids, it kind of put a responsibility on me that I had to not really owe them back or pay them back, but that I could show them what they were doing, the effort they were putting forward wasn't going to waste. And all the time that they took between work to drive us to practice, to take us here, to take us to this workout, to take us there. I never wanted those type of things to go unnoticed. And so anytime I was in a situation where I had to perform or I had to put, my body on the line to do whatever I needed to do, it was a lot different for me. And I took it a different way than some people normally would. And like you said with like Theo and Thomas, how they would kind of watch my demeanor change. That's the way that I took it. Is okay. I'm here. There's other trainers, other coaches, whoever's running this thing. I got to show them why I'm different than the other 500 guys that are here, or even the other 9 guys that are here, and I'm the 10th guy. I got to show them why I'm different and what's different about me. And if it's going to just start with my attitude and how I'm taking this deal that we're in right now, then so be it. Then I'll let it start here. And so just being aware of what others were doing for me, I knew that I had to give it back in some way. And to me, it was just whatever I was doing athletically, make sure that it was on point every single time. And that kind of shaped me into the athlete that I was and the person that I was and still am.
Yeah, I remember, and it was kind of cool to see you to where you were naturally gifted, but you wanted to maximize whatever that was for you. I think that's a really common theme for a lot of, I wouldn't say now, because I think there's a group of Polynesian kids now who kind of, take pride in like, man, I'm trying to make it, you know what I mean? But like back then, there was a huge group of poly kids like, I'm naturally more talented than you. And you being a trainer that you are, what has the experience been like, working with these kids? Did you ever notice like there's a shift of like these new up and coming athletes who are like, man, they're a lot more focused than we were when we were that age?
Kind of a little bit. I know when I first started training, guys were kind of a little skeptical, like, I don't know if this is, I've had all these other, camps in Utah. What's going to be different about this? Or, what is Ross going to bring that these other camps haven't brought? And I think it's just that firsthand experience of having talent, but pushing through even when you have talent, or maximizing everything, all the talents that you do have currently. I think just that firsthand experience, and for me to be able to relate to a guy and tell him, hey, you're pretty good, but you could be a lot better. And that should be your goal, and that should be your focus, and not only for sports but in life, right? You could be good at numbers, but go ahead and do the extra math and learn a little bit more, and then you could work for a bank, and then you'd put those numbers to actual use. And I think that's been the shift with me working with guys, is I'm able to let them know, like, you're good, but there's another guy that's out there that's just as good, but he's willing to pick up the weights. He's willing to hit the track. He's willing to do some of these things that you don't want to do. And that guy, he's going to get an offer first. And that guy, he might get drafted, before you, or first. That guy might be first team, you might be second team. And that's just the difference is what are you going to do with the talent that you do have? Are you going to try to ride on it, or you're going to try to add to it? And I think that's where people start learning more and more about themselves, is when they're already good and they can get better. What do I have to do to get better? It's going to be tough, but in the long run, it's definitely worth it. And I think just letting guys know that you can add on to whatever you have, it makes a huge difference. And that's what I've seen with the young guys coming up. And even yesterday, I was training an 11-year-old kid, and he was just kind of listening, and everything we went through, he was going through, and even the corrections I was giving him, he was making them at 11 years old. And it's just that's not really common. But then to me, I was driving home and I was like, man, I was just working with this 11-year-old kid, and he was taking direction exactly how I was giving it. He was making all these corrections exactly how I was telling him. I must be kind of doing something right for 11-year-old kid to lock in for a full hour, and then once we're done, boom, he's back to being a kid. So he must have seen something, heard something, or he believes in something that I do, for him to want to come out to take an hour out of his day, and they're on fall break, and for him to come to a workout, and just having the firsthand experience and being able to pass it on is definitely been eye-opening for me, to see the change that it can make with the youth coming up in Utah.
Oh man, that's awesome. I always like to hear those stories, just because I think all of us have some type of experience that someone can learn from. You don't have to be an expert in anything, but you're an expert in your own experience, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, being that you work with these kids, trying to help them get exposed so they can get offers.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe let's talk about your recruiting process and how high school football went for you.
So by the time I reached the end of my high school career, I pretty much had the option to go wherever I wanted to go for school. And these were all full ride scholarships, so I wasn't paying for school. First off, I wasn't going to pay for school anyways, and I decided that early on, before any success, before I knew where I was going to end up. I had made the decision, I'm not going to pay for school. I'm not going to have to get a job and save up money to pay. I'm going to make sure that they pay for my schooling. And that was my number one goal, was to get school paid for, because of the people that we grew up with, and some of the examples that I had seen. If you don't have like a real goal that you're working towards, where you can end up, and it's not taking shots at anybody we grew up with, but I've seen a lot of really good guys kind of stay in the neighborhood, in that same place. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want that for myself. And I didn't think it was selfish. I didn't think I was trying to be better than anybody. I just knew that I wanted to get up out of that area that I was in, into something different for myself. And knowing that early on was definitely something that I think in the future helped my recruiting process. So kind of going back to my senior year, I was a high school All-American. Like I said, I was just kind of could pick and choose where I wanted to go to school. But that was a goal early on in life. And kind of just ended up where I was in high school, finishing up. I was able to come to BYU. Everything was paid for. I did all 4 of my years. Got to walk the stage in graduation. So I controlled my whole recruiting process. And from step 1 to the last step, I had full control of it. And that's exactly the way that I wanted it.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm just thinking back, I know you originally had committed to what was it, Texas?
Texas.
And then you ended up decommitting and going to BYU.
Mm-hmm.
What was the driving force and why you decommitted?
Because I knew a quarterback would be important. I knew that really good teammates around me were going to be important. And so when I got to that point, Jake Heaps was the quarterback I was coming in with. We had a good relationship prior to coming to BYU. Even prior to graduation, we already had a good relationship. Went to a couple camps, and so first thing was first. Like, I had to have a good relationship with the quarterback, and I had to have a good relationship with the coaches. And even though BYU was up here in Utah, they still made an effort to come down and see me. They were calling every day. And at that time, 2009 and before, maybe the 4 years prior, 2005 through 2009, sorry, BYU had been really good. So they had Max Hall, they had John Beck, Harvey, and all those guys playing the years before, and they just had come off of beating OU, and I think I can't remember if they beat Florida State or not, but they were coming off of some winning seasons and I seen some really good things between, QB, receiver, and in the offense. And so me coming in with Jake, I kind of seen, oh man, we could do the same thing. And to me, it wasn't about the logos of the school. I really wanted to go to a school that was gonna, give me the ball and help me get to the next level. And so if I had to go to a D2 school to make that happen, then so be it. Then I would have did that. Like I said, I wasn't worried about if my shirt had, a cougar on it or a Longhorn. That wasn't a concern to me. My biggest concern was the guys I was coming in with, the coaching staff. Were all these things going to be on point for me to help me get to the next level where I wanted to go? And so that was the whole decommitment from Texas, and everything was the quarterback I was coming in with, the guys I came in with to BYU. Kind of that whole class was pretty nice. Yeah.
Man, I remember that was the first time BYU had like a top 15 or top 20 finish in terms of recruiting class. And I forgot what it was. I think it was Jake Heaps. He had came on and said like, oh yeah, we're like, our intention is to win like a national title, like his first like freshman press conference, and everyone in Utah like, who the heck does this kid think he is?
Yeah.
But it kind of, goes true to, your guys' class that came in together. You guys all kind of, carried yourself differently in terms of, hey, we're going to try and change things around, and, we're playmakers, this and that. I remember your freshman year, you redshirted, right? I think.
Yep.
And then you came back your freshman year, and being from Euless, and we had moved here to Utah. Whenever you started going off, I think you had 9 touchdowns as a freshman. So in comparison to what your career had turned into because of your injury, maybe just talk about the ups and downs and how you probably navigated emotionally through all of that.
So the initial injury happened my senior year in high school. So it happened in Texas, and that was the first time that I got hurt. So I never knew about injuries, about what it's going to take to come back. I've always been able to get through sports without injuries, and I was blessed to make it that far. But the initial injury happened my senior year, and I was playing safety. I came down to tackle a guy, and he kind of shook me, and so my feet were planted in the grass, and I reached out with one arm, and he kept running. My feet didn't keep moving, and so he basically just ran my shoulder out of the socket. And so I just remember I knew something was wrong, and I was laying there, and I didn't know what it was. And the trainer came on, and I told him it was my shoulder. He looked at it. He's like, "Oh, it's out of place." So they put it back in place. And I just remember, walking to the locker room just to grab to put some ice on it so I can go back in the game. And I was like, man, I hope this isn't something that is gonna, linger on and affect my career. And I'll jump forward to my freshman year at BYU. So I finished out my senior year. My dad wasn't going to pay for the surgery. He had already told me, we're going to wait till you get to BYU, let them take care of it. And so I went through I think it was like the last 3 months of my senior season, got to BYU, and I was trying to push the surgery as far back as I could. So as soon as I got to campus, I started working out, I started training. And so I knew I was going to have to go into surgery. So I tried to get as strong as I could, get as fast as I could. So when I got in and got out, I was kind of in better shape than I would be when I first got to BYU. And so I had the surgery, I'd probably say like halfway through the summer. at BYU. So then that'd give me about 4 or 5 months to heal up. And within those 4 to 5 months that I had to recover, I was kind of learning a lot about myself, and in terms of, okay, so I'm useless to these guys right now. What can I do to not make myself useless? Where can I help the team? Where can I help myself? And so I kind of found myself, in my room sometimes, just like, gosh, just deep in thought, not knowing what to do, because I never dealt with an injury. Mm-hmm. And then keep in mind, my family's still in Texas, 3,000 miles away. So it's just me. It's just me by myself. And I'm having to deal with, adversity kind of at the point of my life when I'm just now, learning to be a man kind of on my own. Mm-hmm. And that was the toughest part, is trying to figure out how to navigate through something you haven't been through. And then it's happening when you're by yourself. Usually, I'd have my dad or somebody around to call, or even come over and be like, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. How do you think I'd get through this? The phone calls would help, but it's just different when you have people that have been in your corner your whole life in person. Yeah. Now it's kind of turning into a phone call, and then a phone call, I can't really describe what's going on. And so that was the hardest part, was getting here and being hurt and being by myself and not having anybody to help me through or kind of coach me through where I should go. And so, like I said, I learned a lot about myself, and a few things, a few important things that I learned about myself was that I'm kind of like a problem solver. Regardless of what the problem is, I always try to find a way to fix it or get out of the situation. And I think that's been one of the most important things for me up to date, is having the ability to solve something that's not really in my control, or adapting to the situation. And that's kind of how I had to deal with the injury. Was just by myself and figuring out what to do, and it did take a little toll on my mental, right? If your mind's not right, your body's not right. If your body's not right, your mind isn't right. And for me, my body wasn't right, so my mind wasn't right. And it took me having to get back in, to rehab my shoulder. It took me having to be back around the team. It kind of I just had to be around other people to get through it, and it was tough doing it by myself. But like I said, I was able to figure things out about myself that are kind of helpful through life, I guess.
And I remember. Now this is just speaking because I've always been a huge fan of yours growing up. I remember watching that freshman season of yours and seeing you go off. Maybe describe the feeling you had. You decommitted from Texas, mm-hmm. and then you probably made one of the biggest plays playing against them. What was it, like a post corner in the end zone to score a touchdown?
Yep.
And what was the emotion like going back home to Texas and winning a game? Was it out there that you guys won?
Yep. So no, it was here that we won. Okay. Out there we were ahead kind of the whole game, and mm-hmm. and they came back and beat us. But the emotions going back home were pretty high. I had a good relationship with Mac Brown and the coaches that were over there already, mm-hmm. and it had been a couple years. So I redshirted my freshman year. And so we went back my redshirt freshman year, and that was my first year to step on the field. And so I think a couple weeks before we had played Ole Miss, I had a touchdown. We played, I think it was the next game was Utah. I had a touchdown, and so going back home, I was ready to go. I was hyped to play. I was never nervous. I was just ready to get out on the field, and going back home and seeing, the family that was out there, and seeing people that took care of me as I was coming up, I kind of felt like, oh man, I got to put on a show, or I got to do something to show them that the work that they helped me put in, it didn't go unnoticed. And so going back home, I was just ready to go out on the field. I mean, as soon as we landed and got to the hotel, I was already outside walking around, kind of just soaking everything up. I was ready to go. And so the day of the game, we get to the stadium. I'm just walking around the stadium like a couple hours before. It's hot outside, so I get back in. I'm already sweating. I didn't really care because at the time, like I said, I prepared for this game. And so leading up to the game, they made us practice in the indoor facility, but they closed all the vents, so it was just hot and humid. So by the end of every practice, we were already sweating. And so then I would go home, and I would just turn the shower on and put it on hot, and I would just sit there and kind of just sweat it out a little bit more, just so when we got there, cramps weren't happening. I wasn't, getting delirious from the heat. That was my attitude going forward into the game, and I don't think I've shared that with anybody. Kind of what I did at home to prepare for a game like that. At 18, 19, you just don't do things like that. And now that I look back, it's like, man, I was kind of weird. I was kind of a weird guy, but whatever it took, whatever I had to do. And like I said, that started from an early age. Like I already knew what I wanted to do in life. I kind of had everything mapped out. I just had to fill in the gaps, those little gaps in there. And to me, going back home, that was one thing that I felt I had to do, was crank the shower on hot and just sit in there and sweat. But it paid off. We got there. I had a couple good grabs. I had a touchdown, and I went back and watched the replay, and to be able to see the fans with their hands on their head, and they're like, what's going on? And that guy was supposed to come here, and now he's over there and he's balling. It was a good feeling. But that was the plan from day one.
Man, that's awesome. So I kind of talked about the high side of your career. As you went on, your sophomore, junior, and senior year, I remember I saw a quote from your wide receiver coach at the time when it came to, I think, your junior or senior year, and he had said, it's just really unfortunate for Ross because, injuries had plagued the back end of your career. And I remember friends who were BYU fans, and I'd never really been a BYU fan, but if I had family playing for them or friends like you, I would always root for you guys whenever you guys were playing. And I remember one time I had a friend who came up to me. He's like, man, your boy Ross, man, he's not playing well. What's up with him? This and that. And, as since I know you personally, I was like, man, don't talk to me. You don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
We all kind of knew you were playing hurt for those last 3 years. Maybe go into the mental side of you talked about it before. Your body can't perform. But mentally and your desire to actually want to do those things was there. It's just your body wasn't capable of doing those things.
Yeah. So the mental side of having to deal with an injury is tough, because for guys that put everything they have into a sport, or even whatever profession that you're in, or whatever you're doing at the time, even if it's a hobby, when you put a lot of time and energy into what you're doing, and for me it was football, I always seen the outcome, or I was always able to kind of see what this extra work would do for me in the future. And that's the reason why I grinded the way I did growing up. And so with my mentality and having to deal with those last years and having to go through injuries, I was always picturing myself doing this, but then my body would do that or something else. And that was the hardest part, was having to accept, okay, my body's not 100%. My shoulder, it doesn't feel good. I can't do the things that I want to do. I mean, by the end of my career, I was having to play with tape basically my shoulder was taped to my body, or else it would just come out of socket, and that's where I finished up. But having to sit back and think, man, this is what I could be doing, but this is where I'm at. That was the hardest part, was having to deal with that reality. And in my head, I understood, but I knew that I had a job to do, and that was to go out and help my team win and perform for these people that, that invested in me, that are here paying for tickets to watch me play. Was that I was kind of letting those people down. It wasn't so much I was letting myself down, because I already knew what I was dealing with. I knew what it was. I kind of knew, if I didn't make these catches, I'd be okay. I would be okay. But it was just letting my family down, letting my friends down, letting people down that believed in me. Because of this stupid injury, I just couldn't do anything, and it's hard to accept that fact. And then, I'm not going to go around and tell people, yeah, I'm not feeling good, so you guys don't expect a good game. It's not even that. I'd come out confident, and then I'd go up for a catch, and I just couldn't go up and get it. That was definitely hard. And even now, people they're still like, man, what happened? What happened to you? And, I just tell them, man, I was dealing with some crazy injuries. And I finally, a couple years ago, I finally came to accept that, it is what it is. And, as bad as that sounds, that's kind of how I had to get through it, because it was even still bothering me after BYU. I just kind of look back and, how did I let these things happen? And the injury was so serious that it kind of got me to that point where I just couldn't function the way that I wanted to, and it took a huge effect on the way that I played. It just took a huge effect on my attitude and everything, kind of moving forward through those weeks.
Man, I don't think. People usually just see football players as just, guys who go out there and play football. But to really personalize, maybe let's put this in the perspective. You train your whole life for these moments. And when things don't align, it's kind of like, okay, like, what am I going to do now?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so for you, maybe talk about how you transitioned after football, right? So you graduate from BYU. What were the next steps into where you are today in terms of work?
So I graduated from BYU, and then I had some extra time after to see if I could keep pushing. And I remember it was a practice with the Seahawks, and it was a special teams drill, and I was running down, and we were kind of just fitting the gaps, and I kind of went up to hit, and my shoulder it made it like a little grinding noise, and that was the last time. And I was like, okay, I just need to kind of shut it down. And so making that decision to just stop playing completely was tough. That was super hard. I just remember, going back to my room, and I was crying because I knew I was done. And I knew that I just couldn't keep going forward, because I would get to a point and then I would fail, and get to a point and I would fail. And to me, quitting wasn't the option, but there is a life after football. And there was a reason why I graduated from BYU, and I didn't leave my junior year or just leave school altogether, because the first goal was getting a degree from BYU, no matter what. Whether I finished playing football, whether I continued playing football, the degree was number one. And as you know, with poly family, school is always first. Mm-hmm. For parents that are bringing us up, school always comes first. And so I just had to remember, I have a degree, I can go do something. And so I really didn't get over football. I'm still not over football. Like I said, I still kind of, watch games, and I'm like, man, I could go out there and make that catch. And then, I go out and I'm working with the guys that I train, and I'm like, yeah, I definitely couldn't have made that catch. I don't know if I could do that now. But that, going through the injuries, having to deal with those things mentally, now, to the present time, now that I'm working with guys, I do deal with guys that have injuries, and now I feel like I can help them get through. I'm not going to give them the usual football, just get over the injury, or go put some dirt on it and tape it up and you'll be good. I can actually help guys kind of navigate through their injuries, keep their head on straight, and then when they get back, to the sport, they're good to go. And I think I don't know if me going on and continuing playing, or if me having a great career would put me in this position to help these guys. And I think these guys, and when I say these guys, I mean guys that play a big role in their program, are hurt and then they're trying to come back. I think those guys are the ones that need help the most. There were a lot of good athletes that said they looked up to me. There's a lot of good athletes that they can look up to, that they can watch every week. But you're not going to get that injured athlete that had everything and lost everything, that's going to come out and tell you, hey, here's what you need to do, or this is how you should try to handle the situation. You're not going to get guys to come out and do that. And so I feel like, even though I had to go through the injury, even though it kind of just took me away from the game, I can still help other people stay in the game and help them kind of rehab, I guess, their minds, their mental, and get them back in the game. And so it transitioned, being hurt, being done with BYU, and where it's guided me in my business, my career. It's kind of helped me tap into other things I could do besides just training. I can help mentor guys and help them guide them through tough times that they'd probably be going through. The same things that I went through.
Man, that's so awesome to hear. I think I can remember, just like feeling bad. I was like, man, I knew Ross was working and trying to get to that point.
Yep.
But what's been awesome to see now is not only the transition of you after football. I remember I was talking to you before you had your daughter, and I remember the first thing that you said. It's like, yeah, I think the first thing I need to buy is a gun. Jokingly, and we were just sitting there laughing. But you go from a place to where it's like, dang, life seems so hopeless, to a place to where having that sense of family and having a child can kind of change your perspective in life. Maybe I just want to give you this opportunity to maybe speak about how having a family has kind of maybe shifted your mindset in terms of, as much as I love football, my family, there's a solace it kind of brings to me that no matter how hard I fail, I can come back to these guys and I know they got me.
Having a family, I guess even just having our baby girl, I think the toughest thing, or kind of where I'm having to learn to grow, is time management. And even on my way here, every time I leave out the door, she's always crawling towards my feet. She just doesn't want me to leave. And so having to manage the time and knowing, okay, I gotta be here, or I have to be there. I'm kind of learning that you gotta plan like hours and hours ahead, because you just never know what's gonna happen. As far as the family goes and how it shifted, kind of shifted my whole thought process and where it's gotten me to now. And I keep jumping back to this. It was just the way that I grew up with my family. They would do anything they needed to do to make sure that I was okay, that I was taken care of. And it might not have been, food on the table every single night, but it was a home, a roof over my head every night. And so when we had our baby, or our daughter, it was kind of the same idea. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make sure that she has a roof over her head. And for me, it was and more. And so, from going to training to try to, I want to stay in it. I want to try to keep pushing as far as I can, to now having a daughter and having to give up all that stuff so I can provide. I think the way that I grew up with my parents and how they would sacrifice whatever they needed to do, I'm kind of doing the same thing. But I'm able to stay around the game because I have my training business, and so it's kind of shifted my the way that I live in terms of, I'm gonna do everything for her first, and then I come last in the family. That's kind of where I'm at. And that's no, I wouldn't say kind of. That's exactly where I'm at. And that's kind of where having a family has taken me to, is, the things that I do or the choices that I make are for these guys here, not really for myself. And I wouldn't want to have it any other way. I think that's the only way to do things.
Man, what a blessing. I remember I had a specific experience that kind of like drove me to kind of where I am now with starting the podcast. I remember, so I work at the airport at Delta, for those of you who don't know, and I remember it was leading up until my wife was giving birth, and I remember I was just cranking out hours because I knew we were going to have a bunch of hospital bills,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew that I wasn't going to be working for probably like around a month,
Mm-hmm.
just so I could be there to help take care of my wife and the baby. And I think I accumulated up to like 200-300 hours of work.
Man.
And I was working like 60, 75-hour weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty much sleeping in my car, going back to work. And I remember specifically, the bills for the hospital came back. I had my daughter, and I had paid off everything, and it was like, I think we had like $45 in my bank account after I'd paid for everything, and I was like, I for real like busted my ass this month,
Yeah.
and I have nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
And it resonated with me. It was like, if I'm gonna bring my daughter into this world, I'm gonna make sure when she comes into this world that I can present a type of life that that kind of shows her, is like, be ambitious in life,
Mm-hmm.
chase things that that don't drain you, but
Mm-hmm.
kind of are fulfilling for you.
Yep.
And so that summer, I go and try to sell for Vivint, and I had like a life-changing experience. I'm selling in Chicago, and I remember we were selling with AI and who's the other linebacker that sells with him? I can't remember.
Brandon Ogletree. Yep.
Ogletree. And I remember they were saying, it's like, for those of you who are just here to be here and have fun,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, and you're trying to come home early every day around 7:30, 8 o'clock, we have people knocking doors till 9:30 at night. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, and so I kind of took that personally. So I was knocking doors till almost 10 o'clock, and I finally got into a house, hit my first sale, and then it was like 9:45, almost 10 o'clock. Mind you, we're on the south side of Chicago in a bad neighborhood. And I call up my car group, and I tell them, it's like, hey, I'm done. I finally just got my first sale today. And it's like, and it's because, I stayed out here and tried to grind.
Mm-hmm.
While I'm sitting out there, I remember I was under a light pole, and they were supposed to come pick me up in this neighborhood. A dark sedan pulls up, and a guy drops his window, and he's just like, hey man, where you from? And being from Euless, I can kind of tell, like, oh, that's not the right tone. Like, he's trying to pull up on me. I had my iPad in one hand, and then I had like a notebook in the other, and I just looked like a salesman, but they probably see an iPad. It's like, oh, there. And so all these things are racing through my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And before he gets a chance to put his window all the way down, whenever he said that, I just turned and run. That was my first reaction.
Yeah.
I turned the corner, and I can feel like a gust of wind pass right under my armpit.
Yeah.
And like my heart is just like racing. And I was just like, oh shoot, this is really happening.
Dang.
I heard gunshots fire, and I remember I go down this alleyway and I go to jump over this fence that's probably like at least 6 feet high, you know what I mean? And I go to jump and I miss the whole entire fence as I'm going over, and I was like, oh shoot. And so, you know, I'm running on adrenaline going down 3 or 4 streets. I finally stop by a house that has a huge hedge up in front. And I hide behind this hedge, call an Uber, right? Uber picks me up, takes me to another side of the town. We get in the car, and I tell everyone what had just happened to me. And they're like, oh, shoot, that's crazy. And everyone's like freaking out. And as we're getting ready to pull out of the gas station, another car pulls up, different car. And before guys getting ready to go out, he has a gun in his hand, and he puts on his ski mask.
Oh, man.
And he looked at all of us as soon as that had happened, right? And it was just like 2 things in the span of like 45 minutes just happened just like that. And so I tell our driver's like, go, go, go. I'm like screaming at the top of my lungs. He pulls into oncoming traffic, whips out, and then we hit like 120 the whole entire way home.
Man.
And a 45-minute drive that took us like 20 minutes to get home. And we get back that night, and I tell, you know, all my leaders and managers what had happened. Oh, man, sorry. And then they're apologizing to me, and I told them, oh, I'm okay. Call my wife, tell her what had happened. My daughter had just been born in February. This is probably April, May. I tell her what had happened, and she's like, oh shoot, and you know, she's taken aback, and I can tell like she wants to cry.
Yeah.
And I told her like, don't worry about anything, you know, I'm gonna sleep on it, and you know, however I feel tomorrow will probably like tell me if I'm okay or not. I wake up at 1:30 in the morning, and I am in a dead sweat. Like I had never sweat like this in my whole entire life. All my covers were soaking wet, and I was just like breathing super hard, and it was the first time I had an anxiety attack in my own sleep. And what happened was I relived this moment in my dream for like a span of like 3 or 4 hours, and it kept replaying and replaying and replaying, and it was like my life was flashing before my eyes. Called my wife at like 2:30 after I've like finally calmed down and in a space where I can actually talk. And I tell her, it's like, and as soon as I call, she picks up on the first ring. She doesn't even let it ring. It's like, hey. I was like, oh, shoot. And then she's like, I couldn't sleep. And I was like, I think I just had an anxiety attack. And she's like, oh, you need to come home. So I booked my flight and go home. And I remember sitting at home, and I was just like, dang, I felt like a failure at the time. You know what I mean? You know, I try to be ambitious in a sense. I took 2 or 3 months off of work. And then when I came back, I remember telling her I was like, I want to do something that I feel like I can be proud of and look back at. And it kind of like pushed me to where I am now. Okay. And so I don't know why that like all just like came out. I've never really told anyone except like my little family that story. But I feel like fulfillment over, you know, doing things that you have to do will probably always be the better answer, because then, you know, you'll be in a better space mentally, and I think that's probably where that stems from and why I wanted to share those stories. Sorry for ranting.
No, you're good. You're good. I think we all hit one of those points. And if you don't, I think it's healthy to hit a point like that. I don't know if it takes getting shot at to hit the point, but I think I definitely think that everybody should hit that point. You know, I kind of had a similar but different story. When I graduated from BYU, I worked in mortgage. You know, and it was cool. It took care of what it needed to take care of financially, but I was just missing something. You know, and I knew it was football, and I knew, you know, being out on the field, that's what I knew my whole life. Having a ball in my hand, whether it was shooting, catching, or throwing, I knew that that's kind of what was missing for me. And so when I started my training business, things took off a lot faster than I thought they would. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then it got to a point, you know, how how is this thing modeled out? How are things gonna happen? Year 1, year 2, year 3, and I wasn't even thinking about those things. I honestly, I was just going out and I was filling this void that I had in life, and I think that's kind of gotten me to where I am now. Is I was because I was filling the void. I wasn't really thinking about, oh, I gotta pay this bill here, I gotta pay this bill here. It was filling this void and also making money doing something that I enjoy. So by the end of the month, I'm just like, man, I made all this money, and that wasn't even the plan. The plan was just to go out, train these guys to get better, and that was it. And so, I love to hear that story, because it kind of brought you here to do this podcast. And like you said, it's not about all the hours that you put in. It's not always about taking care of this bill or that bill, unless you're on your ends meet. I think it's about enjoying what you do. And if you enjoy what you do and it brings you that fulfillment, everything else that follows, it's going to happen naturally. And I kind of, I could feel where you're coming from with that story, because when I quit the mortgage company, I was like, oh man, I hope that this continues to grow. But I don't even know why I was thinking, I hope. It kind of is just happening this way. And like I told you before we started, I'm still training new guys in season. Like, I have a new group of guys coming up in 2 days on Saturday. And that's kind of to the point, that's the point that I'm at. And so, even though, I'm having a lot of fun, it's still taking care of everything that it needs to, and a little bit more.
No, that's awesome, man. I think we're getting close to our end point.
Yep.
I think the last question I would want to ask you is just advice, upcoming athletes, or just anyone within our Polynesian community. What would you say to them, maybe from the all the experiences that you've accumulated over your life?
The best advice that I could give is just to work harder and work smarter. Do all the work now. Before you get to where you want to go, just do all the work now. Have a plan. Once you have a plan set, then you can start moving forward and doing the things you need to do. And then things aren't going to be hard. You're not trying to cram here and there, because you have a plan. You know your end goal. You're going to be able to take care of business when you need to. Friends, the hanging out, all the little distractions that we all deal with. It's going to be easy to prioritize those things. And that's kind of my experiences, and that's what I'm learning now, is to just put in the work for the future Ross, or for your future self, because as you get older, it doesn't get any easier. It just, you're more tired. Your body's just like, oh man, I don't want to get up. So definitely do the work early, and let yourself in the future pat your past self on the back, and let them know, appreciate what you did, several years ago. It definitely paid off to where we're at now.
That's what's up, man. Thanks again for coming on the show. Ross Apple on The Power of Perception. Thanks, bro.
Yeah, no problem.